So I have a question for you today. Are you an artist that ever suffers from the dreaded artist block? Do you ever hit a brick wall creatively and you just don't know how to get those creative juices flowing again? Well, I'm BJ Dell. In today's video, I'm going to show you a technique that I use whenever this happens to me, and hopefully if you put it into action, it'll get you out of that artist block and allow you to keep creating. So if you want to learn all about that and more, keep watching. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. As always, I'm using the iPad Pro 1st Gen model, 12.9 inch, along with the Apple Pencil and Procreate. But honestly, this is not a digital technique. So if you just want to use a pencil and paper, this is just to get out of the artist block, and I'll show you how I do that. So first thing I'm going to do, if you are using digital, I like to just make a little line here, and then I'll drop the opacity of this layer just because I want a really light sketch. So this is the same thing if you're using traditional pen and paper or pencil and paper. Just make some really light lines with the pencil. And the idea here is jumping into this, having really no idea what you're drawing, just getting some really sketchy, loose lines. And you'll see as I'm doing this too, the way my arm's moving, I'm not drawing from the wrist like this. The whole idea here, and it's the way that I usually draw too, is just big motions with your arm, actually using the entire arm all the way up to your shoulder, and just getting some fun lines, getting some fun shapes, and just really starting out with no idea of what you're doing. This can be anything, and just drawing some lines and seeing what your eye starts to kind of picture in this drawing. And there's just a few different ways that, this can be perceived. So just keep on going until stuff starts to build up. Here I can see a few things. So it almost looks like maybe this kind of like round guy with this big nose here, and like ears and shoes coming off here, or feet. Just keep going until you can build up something that you are happy with, just using shapes, and kind of go from there. I kind of like this like teardrop look too. And as I'm building this up and the roundness, like I said, I see that figure, but again, I'm kind of seeing, I'm going to move this down a little bit. I'm kind of seeing almost like an onion, or actually this would be more like a garlic clove with like the teardrop shapes. So I think that's what I'm going to go for. So we draw like the little stuff coming up here. And then I'm going to go ahead and drop the opacity of this one a little bit more. Then I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to drop the opacity of that one because I want to kind of sketch this out a little bit stronger now. So this is how I would do it if you're using digital. If you're using just traditional pencil and paper, this would be where you could either just press harder, or if you want to grab something with a little bit thicker lead or a harder lead, you could do that as well. And like I said, this is just a really fun exercise to do if you're stuck in that creative block, if you don't know what to draw. It also works really well. I do this in the mornings for kind of my warm-up. If I'm going to be drawing stuff all day, I'll usually start out with something like this just to kind of get the motion in my wrist going, the motion in my arm, and just to kind of warm up and feel comfortable for the day. It's almost like, if you're working out and you kind of need to stretch beforehand, this is also a good exercise to do at the beginning of the day as well. So it doesn't have to be just for artist block. I think I will go ahead and make a face out of this too. The other thing that you could do as well is one of my previous videos, I talked about drawing the shapes from clouds and seeing what you see in clouds. So if you're stuck with something, and you're in a rut, you don't know what to draw and don't know what to do, that's another really good exercise as well. If you go out, take some pictures of some clouds, or even just, download some off the internet and kind of let your mind wander and see what you can come up with as far as the shapes go. I think that's another really fun way to be able to kind of get outside of your head and feel a little bit more comfortable with what you're drawing. So let's go ahead. I'm going to combine these layers now, and then I'm going to drop the opacity one more time, and then I'm actually going to start inking this. So this is where, if you're drawing traditionally, if you want to ink, or once again, if you want to go in with an even harder pencil, or if you even want to take another piece of paper, set it on top of this to start actually doing your finalized drawing, that's a possibility too. So there's a few different ways to approach this depending on what format or what tools you're using to create. I'm just going to kind of build up the outside here. I'm not going to take a ton of time doing this and worrying about each line being perfect, just because I want to give you guys the quickest kind of explanation for this as possible. So we'll go ahead and color it in and everything so you can see a finished design from the beginning to end. But like I said, just want to make it a little quick. So just kind of building up the outside here, getting some really thick lines to kind of give this some weight as it comes around. And then I'm going to use some thinner lines once I go back on the inside to kind of build up the lines of the body or the shape of the different cloves. And here I'll drop the size of my brush just to get some thinner lines here to kind of give this some texture as it comes down and around. This main one, I don't want to split it up too much and knock out too much of the head. I don't want it to come down between the eyes too far, so make sure that's in the right place. So let me know in the comments too if you guys have some techniques that you use. I know some other people had chimed in on the discussion on the Facebook post and talked about getting out and exercising, and there was quite a few different options that were suggested to kind of get outside of your head and kill that artist block. Like I said, this is my technique, and it's always fun too because, like I said, you start out, you don't know what you're drawing, and some of my favorite things that I've drawn actually have come from using this technique. And it's not going to help you if you're trying to draw something definitely like in particular, something that you have in mind. This is really just to kind of free yourself and just come up with something totally original, something totally out of your head, something that's just pops and appears on the paper out of nowhere. And I think that's one of the most fun things about this technique is you might surprise yourself as far as what actually comes of doing this technique and this kind of practice. So all right, let's go ahead and color this guy in. So I'm going to add a new layer underneath here. I'm going to set my lines to reference if you're following along with Procreate. Then I'm going to turn off my sketch lines. I'll start to drop in some colors here. It's just kind of like a light white here, off white. Do a darker shade for the eyebrows because, of course, garlic cloves have eyebrows, The teeth here, get those a little bit more white. And then get the tongue and the little gum part here that comes in. There we go. And for the top part, a little bit of color there, and then I'm going to go ahead and do some shadows on here. As you can see, this is a pretty full-fledged design. Of course, like I said, it's not perfect. I would usually take a little bit longer if this was something I was doing professionally that was going to be printed. I'd probably take a little bit longer on getting the lines just perfect, but that's the kind of the fun part with this is since it's just a practice exercise, you don't really have to worry about making it perfect. It kind of frees up that worry and that part of your head that tells you, everything's got to look perfect that you draw. So kind of relieves some of that stress, and you'll find without having that stress and without beating yourself up trying to make this the absolute best thing you've ever drawn, it actually goes a long way. So you'll definitely find it a little bit freeing, I think, if you try this at home and kind of come up with your own take on this without having to worry about all that stuff. It's kind of taking the shackles off and just letting you have fun. And honestly, with art, that's one thing I think a lot of people forget a lot of the time is, art should be fun. A lot of people just constantly compare themselves to other artists and so on and so forth. And you know, it kind of wears on your self-esteem and can make you kind of despise art. So the more joy that you're able to bring back into it, I think is going to give you some pretty good results and make you feel pretty good with the outcome. So that's kind of the idea that we're going for here. So keep that in mind. The other thing I like to do too when I'm doing those big sketchy lines is try not to raise my hand up too much. Just kind of keeping with one kind of solid, not lifting it up, and just one solid motion that keeps going. I think with that and using that arm movement, like I said, that traces all the way up to your shoulder, it just gives a really nice flow and an organic feel that you're kind of searching for when using this technique. So definitely put that into practice if you decide to try this. We'll throw a little bit of white in here too for some highlights, and then we'll be done. All right. So you see, that is pretty simple, pretty easy way that you can kind of come up with an idea just off the top of your head and make a really cool design that kind of frees up and punches that artist block in the face. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. As always, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Make sure you like today's video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell for notifications so you can get alerted when I post new videos. And also, if you haven't joined the Keep Creating group over on Facebook, make sure you do that. I'll link it in the description below. It's where you can share your art, get feedback, ask questions, meet new friends, and that's actually where today's idea from the video came from, was a question over there. So definitely want you guys to join in along as well. As for me, I can be found online, bjdell.com, as well as on Instagram and Twitter at bjdell. So until next time, keep creating.